Welcome to another Perspective podcast. Josue here. As you guys already know, I'm a fellow believer, native to the Democratic Republic of Congo. We just had our Independence Day. Shout out to the Congo.
Hey.
I'm a preacher at times, a Bible study leader most of the time.
For sure.
I love Jesus. I forgot the other part. I went to Oral Roberts University. Shout out to ORU. And we have the man himself, Mr. Chase Brown. He's a native Texan. Went to the University of North Texas. He loves reading and drawing and painting. I'm joking about those.
Don't do that.
He's ascribing philanthropic creative. There he goes. I'm getting better at that.
There we go.
Man, how are you doing?
Dude, doing good, man.
Yeah.
It's been a good, I'd say, last few weeks, and with everything kind of shutting down again.
Yeah.
Just trying to
Texas,
figure,
right?
dude.
Jeez.
Goodness, we gotta just figure things out.
Yeah.
But just seeing what life is like with that, being able to just think about things, just continue, just think about what's going on with cultural conversation.
Yeah.
Everything going on in regular life. Work's good, family's good. Man, just life in 2020, which is weird.
Yeah.
But how about you, man?
I've been good as well. I mean, similar to a lot of the things you're sharing, just trying to figure out life and, have great conversations. I've been meeting a lot of new people on different spaces in life, I guess. And hanging out with friends, building those relationships that's going to help you out later on in life.
Like that wedding last night.
Like that wedding I went to last night. Shout out to the wedding. But for those of you listening, and we have a very interesting topic today. We felt like it would be great to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Chase going to get into it some more, but just around the topic of friendships and disagreements, differences, especially when it comes to just what some may say political views or just different things like that.
Yeah.
I know that's a general term, but we'll just leave it at that and just have a great conversation from that.
Yeah, and pretty much kind of how this came up is Josue had a post on social media. I mean, the boy is popping on social media.
Low-key popping.
And basically is talking about, with how polarized things have got, like why aren't people willing to have conversations anymore?
Right.
Why are we just canceling people at the drop of a hat? And our conversation's key. Like, can we agree to get to disagree? Like,
Right.
Are these thoughts that we've had for, however many years, like, good? Or are they things that we can keep up with in 2020? Or things that we should value going forward?
Right.
And so we both love conversations.
Yeah.
That's one of the main reasons that we started the podcast.
Yeah.
Was for people to come together, just share their perspectives, have conversations, and just grow from it. And we definitely think there's value in that. But we can have this conversation figuring out, what are the lines of that? Where is the value in conversations and different things like that? But
Right.
As we get into that, kind of going into it, we'll first, Josue, go with what are your general thoughts on, just whether it's disagreements, whether it's just conversation in general. And then going after that, what was some of the response you got from what you posted on social media?
Okay. Yeah. So, I was literally, maybe this is just me. We'll probably edit this part out if we need to. But I get my best ideas in the shower.
Yeah.
Right. Just when you're by yourself, you're thinking, you're processing. But I was just thinking, I was like, man, I feel like in light of everything, all the conversation we've been having, whether it's wearing masks or COVID or all these different things, I just feel like people don't disagree anymore. It didn't start now. I noticed it a while back where it was just like cutting people off. That was a term that people used a lot of times.
Yeah.
I was kind of confused by it. Why do we keep cutting people off? Like, I didn't get that. But now, in light of everything that's going on, it's just it's increased a lot more. And so that's just kind of where the idea came, and I posted it. But for myself, I'm the kind of person where even if I disagree with you, I disagree with a lot of people, I would still want to be able to maintain some kind of friendship or whatever that might be, for the sake of, if we are genuinely friends, let's keep that, right?
Yeah.
And also in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if what I believe is right, and I cut this person off, then in a sense I kind of separate them from being able to get that point of view, or getting that awareness or knowledge, whatever word we want to use there. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of where, for me, I find it better to stay, right, and kind of work through that with that individual, versus just kind of cutting them off and being like, I'm done with you. Someone else is going to deal with you type of idea. And so that's kind
Yeah.
of where my posts and my initial thoughts were. But in terms of the reactions that I received from that, there were a mixture of reactions. Some people felt that, a lot of people felt that we shouldn't, because I did a poll on Instagram. About 97% of people say it's not just good to just cut people off. It's like, we're not friends anymore. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
On Facebook, I got a lot of responses from people, and those were paragraphs. I was surprised, right? People wrote some paragraphs and novels.
Their Facebook research
Yeah,
papers.
I know, right? I was like, man, I should use Facebook more. But just a common thing that I noticed was a lot of people were saying, hey, we disagree on a lot of things, and we shouldn't find things that cause us to disagree on even more. So in a sense, that kind of speaks towards keeping friendships, keeping relationships. Some people spoke about what is, there are things that are political, and there are things that are not, right? Not everybody defined it for me, but things that some people view as human rights issues. They felt that if they disagree with somebody on those issues, then for them, it's okay for them to separate themselves from that person, that friend, or whoever that might be.
Yeah.
Right. And so right now we have a lot of people that are even separating themselves from family members or whomever that might be, because of the rhetoric or just the way to think and different things like that. So I think it's a very interesting conversation to have, because I don't know what the balance is for that. I know it's a case by case basis, but what about you? What do you think about that?
Yeah. And I'll just say, kind of going off of your thoughts, and then I could share some of my thoughts that I've had. I love what you brought up with your thoughts in terms of, like keeping people around,
Right.
things like that, because it for some reason it immediately made me think of, like, if we have someone who is say a non-believer in our life, that's not like we just cut them off.
Right.
And that's not something that Jesus calls us to do. Now, do they have a different role in our life than like our brothers and sisters in Christ?
Right.
Yeah. And that's something that I think there needs to be conversation about, to kind of figure out what that is. Because I definitely think as more of our country has become not, whether it's not true believers or just not believers in general, the more secular our country has gotten, that's something that's more common.
Right.
And so we need to discuss that. But like we don't separate ourselves from them. And it's not something that we're called to do. And elevating someone who doesn't agree with you on like an idea, elevating to them past the level of someone who's like in action sinned and things like that. Like, it's just like, all right, like that's a little much. And so I love like your thought about keeping them around. As far as like others, I'll definitely say that what you saw in your poll and your conversation, like your question to your friends, is something that I do see a lot of, and that I see as the majority, is that people don't really want to dive into this cancel culture, but do want to embrace others and see the importance of conversations, and see the importance of thinking things through. And I think one of the things of how we can see that is just how much like podcasts, audiobooks, and these long form conversations have grown.
Right.
Because those are things where we really genuinely think about things as humans and as a society rather than something that is in a short 5-minute segment on Fox or CNN.
Well, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
Yeah,
but
you're good.
I don't want to lose the thought. I wanted to actually ask you a question. So, you mentioned, for example, the way we do with people that don't believe, have the same faith that we do. So, for a believer, somebody that, in the sense, you hold to a certain standard, right? Would you still give that same answer, or does that change for you?
So that's something where we need to have the discussion on what are like heart of the gospel like issues and what are more secondary issues. As well, is it like what is love in that instance? Is it something where, because I don't think it's just accepting people necessarily as they are. I think one of the forms of that is like continuing to have those conversations in the midst of real life and like doing life with them. And so kind of similar to like what you and I have done in a way, because, and I mean, with all of our friends.
Yeah.
Because none of us agree with everything with any of our friends.
Yeah.
But yet we have a way of having friendships,
Yeah.
continuing to be friends, and then at times setting different hangouts or different things like that aside to discuss conversations and things like that.
Right.
As well, I think one of the things that does need to be thrown out there is the unfortunate truth, which I know Raul brought up, is that not everyone who calls Jesus Lord, Lord will enter the kingdom of heaven or is a Christian. And so from there, like something that we don't really talk about a lot within the church now that you see so much through the New Testament, especially like 1 Timothy through Revelation, is false prophets and false teachers. Like there are so many warnings about them in the Bible, yet we never actually talk about them. And so is there a potential for a church to be following someone who isn't submitted to Jesus and isn't following the gospel? Yeah, I definitely think so. Even though I know the American church like doesn't want to hear about like false teachers and that being a reality, and because we place, I think, acceptance as the highest virtue of love rather than genuinely loving people and then calling them to be better, of which we see Jesus do just simply with the fact of repentance. Rather than just being like, oh, no, you're a sinner, but you're good as you are. And as well, accepting this fact of like false teachers then requires like self-examination, of which we know, like in James 2, is recommended by James because it says to examine and test all spirits and all teachings. And so none of us really do that. We just kind of take the message on Sunday mornings and take it home. And so, I think from your question, one of the things that, I think we all need to figure out is like, okay, so understand that not everyone who says to be Christian is Christian.
Right.
And so you can see if they are by their fruits, which some of that is action and some of that is ideas that they hold about different societal things, political things, whatever. But I think another thing that kind of comes from that, of which I'll say I don't really have the wisdom on like what the answer to this is, but like how to pursue unity in the midst of disagreement with like secondary issues.
Right.
And so like potentially, I don't want to throw out what I think are some secondary issues and have us like see what would happen and how we should pursue unity in that. But yeah, I don't really know what unity looks like in that situation. I think with like primary gospel issues such as like Jesus and who he is, like that's something where it's just like, I'm sorry, like if you don't agree that Jesus is Lord and is God, like I don't think that, our church or me as a Christian can partner with you in that way. Now, does that mean that I'm not going to love you in regular life? Like, no, because I'm called to love everyone. I'm called to even love my enemy, which false teachers are close to the enemy.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I don't know. Do you have any insight on like, because I know Reward talked about it a lot, pursuing unity, and we desire unity specifically within missions. But what are your thoughts on like pursuing unity within that?
No, I mean, I feel like the response that you gave was appropriate. You know, it's kind of hard. I mean, unity is one of those things that's always challenging to do. You know, it sounds easy, but when it actually comes time to do it, it's like, oh wow, we're doing it right. But no, I mean, I'll definitely agree with your response 1,000%. Like, if we're disagreeing on salvation, right? Because it's only one way in that aspect. Then there's not really like a debate there. But like you said, I'm still gonna love you. Like I'm not going to. I don't want to see you. I don't want to be seen around you or anything like that. You know, I still love you as a person. You know, we can continue a friendship. It's gonna look different because all of my friendships look different, right? It's gonna look different, but the hope is that not that you'll see it my way because I'm not trying to be right. What concerns me the most is, you know, what the word says, you know, what God says about that situation, right? So I don't care about being right. I don't think I have the best opinions on earth. So I'm not taking my opinions, you know, putting them on the pedestal. So
and thinking about it, because this thought just came to my mind. Even if you look at Jesus in his life, like he wouldn't have followed what cancel culture did. Like he almost did the exact opposite, to where people who were sinners and tax collectors, he didn't cancel them and just say, hey, like, I'm not going to associate with you at all. He went to their house and had dinner with them. Probably had conversations about, hey, you're probably doing this wrong and this wrong. This is why. And he was able to have that platform or that entrance to share truth by like loving them up front. And I know, like, I'll say that to be vulnerable, like that's definitely something that I struggle with is how to have that proper balance of like friends or people in my life who I know like are doing things that are hurting themselves. Yet how do I put that to the side for a minute so I can love them, so then they can trust that I have their best interest in mind. So then their ears and hearts will be open to hear, hopefully, the helpful things that I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I actually had a conversation about this the other day, because the Bible talks about how like you weren't just like a sinner and God was over here. Like you were literally his enemy. Right? It says there was enmity. That's a big word. I don't even like saying it too much. But it talks about how you were not even like, you guys were just enemies. You know, that's how much the separation sin had brought by. And so the fact that Jesus hung out with sinners and talked with them and all that stuff is huge. Right. And I remember because somebody posed the question, so then what is that limit? What's that balance? And I feel like in Christendom, I like that word, that's always been something where people try to figure out, because some people it's like completely stay away from those people altogether, right? Because, you know, bad company corrupts good morals. And then there's on the other line, like, hey, let's be friends with people that are quote unquote, not quote unquote, people that don't believe or are not part of the faith for the sake of sowing good seeds and being a light in their lives. But then it's like, where's that balance in your friendship? You know, and so we're not talking about that, but just kind of seeing those two things are both present, right? Because those are, I don't know if you have a question about that. It looks like,
I mean, I had just a thought as well as like maybe a tool to help us whenever we're around friends who aren't believers and who it would be wise to not trust that they would have their best interest in mind, is to make sure that you have good company around in the midst of like potential bad company, because Jesus, anywhere he was around, he had his 12 boys with him. And so
he had his people with him.
And so it was something where, I mean, he was God, so he didn't need the accountability, but I think he modeled that for us so that we would know, like, hey, whether it's we're having dinner with like sinners and people like that, we need people around us, or whether we're flipping tables in the temple, talking out corruption, like we need people around us, and there to either tell us like when we're wrong, or to tell us like, hey, no, like I think this is good. Like the other person just had a hard heart of not receiving that.
Right.
And so I don't know, man. Like it's definitely difficult. But I mean, it's something that I definitely think we need to understand. There's value in conversation. As well, something kind of moving on to the next thought is like when we talk about cancel culture and cutting people out and things like that, one of the things that we haven't properly built into that system of cancel culture, that the gospel has, of which I think shows that cancel culture is not something that we should be following as Christians, is a road for potential redemption. Because there's no way for improvement in that. It completely cuts that out.
Right.
And you don't see that person being able to have any sort of sanctification or improvement or anything like that. And I know Montel, our boy, had a video talking about cancel culture. I can't remember if I sent it over.
I think you
to
did.
you.
Yeah.
And so basically what some of the lines from is a short little 1-minute video on his YouTube and Instagram, but basically some of the quotes from that is like, cancel culture doesn't allow you room to grow, of which Jesus allows plenty room of that. We all make mistakes at the end of the day. Honestly, if half of my social media knew half of my darkest secrets, I'm sure they would cancel me in an instant. And I just don't understand why we would shun someone for simply transparently being human. Because all that cancel culture does is not allow us to be vulnerable, which is one of the things within the church that allows the Spirit to work in us. Because if we don't bring our secrets and our struggles to the light, then the dark is always going to have it.
Yeah, that's a great thought, because I feel like for me that was the heart of my hesitancy when it comes to this, because I'm like, where is the point where someone can be redeemed? Where's the point where someone can be changed, transformed? Because at one point or another, we all walked a certain way, right? Like, let's just say if you're a believer now, however that might look like for you, at one point or another, we all thought a certain way, believed something. A lot of us are being changed, transformed, renewed. And so if someone would have met you 10 years ago, or however it might be, and they had canceled you for a point in time when you had made that mistake, that would have been frustrating. And so what I like seeing is always it's some of the athletes, they'll post something crazy on their social media, and then it gets revealed by somebody like on their Twitter, and then they have to offer an apology. I always feel like they always read the same script. I'm like, where do you guys read the script from? Like, where does it come from?
NFL provided script.
Yeah. I'm like, man, it sounds the exact same. But for those people, because I know some people are like, oh no, forget them, cut them from the team. For me, I kind of struggle with that, because it's like, one, it's at a younger point in their life. Yes, they should have known better. I mean, it's not an excuse. Two, what's the fruit of their life now? Is it still the same? Do they still think the same? Where are they at now? As a person, where are you at now? I mean, so I love that quote that Montel also said. I mean, it's interesting, because if you really think about it, we all agree with that, right? Because if you kind of took the makeup off, or whatever expression we want to use here, and really look at everybody, you can find something that you can cancel anybody on. Some people's is way more egregious than others, but I guess it just kind of depends how we want to approach that. Yeah.
And it's something where, like, I mean, just practically towards the gospel point of view of us evangelism, discipleship, making disciples, like, it's something to where if we cancel someone who is a sinner because they commit adultery or whatever, then literally at that point we don't allow them a path for repentance, of which is something that I'm pretty sure Jesus is in
I think
favor
so.
of.
I think so.
And so we remove that potential, and not even something that potentially is sinful, but just a bad idea. And so I don't, and I mean, then we're getting into the point of elevating ideas and speech as violence, which is a whole separate topic. But yeah, man, I mean, and going off just of the last kind of thoughts that we've been talking about, I mean, James 5:16, confess and acknowledge how you have offended, sinned against one another, and then pray for one another to be instantly healed, for tremendous power is released through passionate, heartfelt prayer. And so maybe that's something is if there's disagreement, pray for the Lord to reveal truth. And just know that, hey, even though that's in the back of your mind, like, it's not something that should potentially affect like a friendship and things like that, because the Lord can reveal truth through, I mean, visions, prayer, words of wisdom, or just conversations.
And I think, I mean, just to kind of add on to that even more, I hope you guys are hearing from us that this is it goes on an individual basis, I guess, especially for you, the listener, for me and Chase and you, the listener. It's on an individual basis in terms of you as a person. How are you going to deal with the fact that's been presented to you, right? Because on one hand, the Bible tells us to, make room for one another's faults, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's so powerful. Just kind of think about like, whoa, I got to make room for their faults. Now, let's clear it up. Some faults are way more egregious than others, so you have wisdom in that. But there's moments where, like Chase said earlier, it's just a bad idea.
Yeah.
Right? Certain things are just bad idea or just dumb, if we could even use that word. And so I think in those moments, it's just like, all right, Lord, I know that my flesh, I know everybody around me is like, man, forget this person, forget that person. But what should I do in this situation, right? And so kind of allowing the Holy Spirit to speak to you in those moments to where you're able to almost personalize, every single one of those instances. I don't think that's asking for too much.
Yeah, and something that Reward pointed out as well that was really, really wise that I think we can so often forget in how practical and maybe pragmatic is a good word that our culture is we want to figure out, like, how do we pursue unity? Like, how do we love and things like that? And he very astutely and properly pointed out, it's just like, at the end of the day, it's something that has to be led by the Spirit and is only accomplished by the Spirit and it moving. And it's something that we literally cannot do this on our own. And so just praying for the Spirit to be there with us, like, I think is key. And yeah, man. And so I think one of the other things that we talked about a little bit before the podcast, that we don't really know what to do with and things like that, but is potentially something good just to kind of watch out for. Because one of the things that one of the responses that you received was, if it's just a disagreement about like a social issue or political issue or economic issue, like, whatever.
Right.
But if it's like a human rights issue, then that's something where it's like, we might not be good, dog. And so one of the things we talked about is like, okay, well, like, where do we draw the lines for like a human rights issue? Because as well, like, what does it look like just simply to disagree on a human rights issue and not be acting on a human rights issue? Because I know, like, one of the things that's been present in the cultural conversation is like a lot of people just, having conversations, talking about it, things like that. But then like a couple weeks later, you saw like, oh no, it's not just good enough for you to talk about this. You have to go, for example, like support Black-owned businesses, or you have to support Black Lives Matter specifically, which I saw, unfortunately, like numerous times. And all of these things to where it's like, hey, words aren't enough. Like, action is where you have to do it. And if you aren't following it up with action, then sorry, like, I can't F with you, basically. And so, so there's a couple different lines there. And so as far as human rights issue, like, I don't think it's the most beneficial thing to maybe dive into right now about what is like all the things that are humans' right issues and
Right.
what aren't, like unless you want to.
No, not really.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like one of the things that I would just encourage us in that is that can be a very easy thing and buzzword to say right now. But I think we just need to make sure that we're pursuing consistency and not hypocrisy in those areas. Because I do think there are some things where, some people could be like, oh, if you don't support Black Lives Matter, then that's a human rights issue. Like, sorry, I ain't with you. But then there could be those same people who support Black Lives Matter who maybe don't support the abolishing of child trafficking with as much vigor as they do with Black Lives Matter or abortion or other human rights issues or even what's going on with the Chinese government in Hong Kong right now. I would very much say that's a human rights issue. And so from there, it's just like, that just kind of gets almost into the cancel culture point again, where you can get someone on anything. Like, and so from there, it's just very difficult to understand internally and just across all your friendships. Like, okay, like when is something a human rights issue? Like, is it not a human rights issue just because we don't bring it up? And I don't know, because from there, I think the more proper thing to potentially get into with humans rights is if it's aligned with the gospel rather than aligned with your thoughts. And from there, those are conversations to have on both an individual level, but then I think us as a culture needs to have it like that cultural societal level, more so within the church, within this culture, rather than like the whole culture as a whole. Because again, going back to the point of like those of us who are within the church, like should not expect unbelievers to act as Christians. Like that's not a proper hope to have.
Right.
And we're just going to get frustrated at God because of our unmet expectations. And so what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a fair point because in one aspect, we're all not as focused on issues that aren't present right in our faces or whatever that might be. And so, I mean, I would hope we're not, just canceling people for, either being unaware or, so it's very interesting because I think as you were speaking, I was kind of just thinking the importance of grace, when it comes to these things and understanding some people they just don't know. Right. So a lot of times, let's pick on America. I'm not picking on America, but let's talk about America. We're focused on things that are present in America, and that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, right? So then you hear about all these other issues around the world, and you're like, wow, right? There are so many issues, things going on around the world that it can just be so overwhelming. If you just want to sit there and write everything down and try to figure out a solution for everything. I mean, it might be overwhelming. So I think while we were having that conversation earlier, the thing that kind of came to mind was like, a basketball player, somebody's coming there playing defense and he shoots, he scores. And the player is the body, right? Like the whole, right? You have different muscles doing different things. Not everybody's going to score, but everybody is participating in the act of scoring. And so I feel like in one aspect, we all might not have the same, like the word you used earlier is passion for certain issues. And that's okay. But I think as a whole, we can do more since there's more of us.
Yeah.
Right? The Bible uses this concept of one can put like 1,000 to flight, two can put 10,000 to flight. And you kind of see how when there's more people involved, you get more things done, you defeat more enemies and things like that. And so I feel like that's a more reasonable approach to issues that are, going on around us, because not everybody's going to be as informed as the next person. So approaching it from that aspect, having conversations like we've continued to talk about, because if not for that, then it's I read this post where it was like, I think it was Albert Einstein, don't quote me on it, probably is, if you judge a fish's ability to climb a tree, am I saying that right? If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then it's going to be stupid.
Yeah.
Right? But whereas you put it in its natural habitat where it needs to go, then it flourishes. And so kind of just taking that and seeing that we all have different areas where we can flourish, and because of that, we're all contributing towards a whole, and so I feel like we can do a better job at understanding that, hey, somebody may not be as passionate towards something.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I'm kind of thinking as I'm saying everything out loud, because for some people it's like, oh, you don't know about this, then it's like you're canceled. It's like, what? I don't know about it. It's my first time hearing about it. Let me process it. Let me understand it. It might take time to process and understand, and that's okay, right? That's kind of where friendships, are important, because you're able to walk some of these things. You're able to walk through some issues with people, because of that. So
yeah, and I think that's kind of potentially where like social media has damaged us in a way. Not us, like our friendship, but just society, is like we don't really walk through things with people anymore. Like, we're just more online. We don't really know how to go through tough things with people. Like, if they're going through tough things, we just kind of just get through it. Let me know when you're good.
Let me know when you're good. Yeah,
and so maybe just like a relearning of that needs to happen during this time. Because man, like, we are very much a culture that likes to take the path of least resistance and pursue comfortability almost anything over anything. And so what I love, because we did talk about it kind of before the podcast, but man, like, playing your role, pursuing your calling is so key. As well, kind of going to the other part of like, man, things are just so dang complex that it is almost ignorant and arrogant for us as individuals to think that like we can change things single-handedly, especially without being filled with the Spirit.
Right.
And so if we're just going on social media, just canceling people being angry rather than asking Holy Spirit, like, what is the proper thing to do here?
Right.
And asking for his counsel above everything and before everything, then man, there's very much a probability that you're going to make things worse than make things better. Because if you think about it, how complex just one of our decisions are and how complex our life is, multiply that by almost 400 million. And that's what we're dealing with as a country as a whole.
Yeah.
Things are so incredibly complex. And for me, it makes me so much more reassured that we know the one who created it all and we know the one who is able to bring shalom and peace. Like, whenever heaven comes back, man, like, the fact that however many people are going to get into heaven, the fact that God is able to organize all that, praise him, man.
Yeah,
because I know
it's too much for me to.
I don't have that. And so it's crazy, and because I definitely do, going back to the roles thing. Yeah, I definitely think that a lot of people could be out of their, like a fish out of water here, to where either they were ignorant, they're diving into this, and they're getting persuaded by either one of the extremes on this conversation.
Right.
Or there are people who think they know what's going on and are just playing into their anger and things like that. And then as well, people who actually do know kind of what's going on and are corrupting or manipulating it in some sort of way. And so I think those of us, as we, I don't want to say return to normal, because I don't know what the second half of this year is going to look like. But I just kind of think as we continue to live life and figure out what a sustainable way and a fruitful way to live life is, praying and returning back to asking the Lord, like, what is my calling?
Yeah.
What are you asking me to do either during this year, during this season, or for my whole life? And our friend Mark Barlow posted this on his Instagram yesterday, which is kind of what sparked the conversation about the roles and things like that. And it really hit me. I'll read it and just kind of say why. There's a lot of things to be woke on. Please stay rooted in the lanes you're passionate about, most angry about. They say the things in the world you're the most passionate about are the things you carry a solution for. We all have solutions to bring. There's so much to be done. If we all focus on one thing, other problems continue or are furthered. Don't let shame cause you to get distracted into solving a problem you're not passionate about fixing, nor equipped to fixing. We can support each other in bringing answers to the world, but also stay in our lanes with undivided attention and be faithful. There's enough work for all of us to do and to run after, considering the brokenness in this world. Now go pray. And for me, yeah, because I was telling Josue this before the podcast, and kind of how it came up is like conversations is one of the things I think both of us love. For me, like this, the race conversation is something that I've been thinking about for a couple of years, but isn't the thing that I feel God has placed on my heart to be passionate about. And so for me, I've seen how my investment into, my thoughts about this conversation, trying to learn things or trying to correct people, whatever mixture it was, has really just affected my faithfulness, like in other areas of life.
Yeah.
Of which I think is one of the signs that y'all can use to see if what you're doing is like the burden that the Lord has put on you. Because his burden is light, his yoke is easy, and what he has called you to do will not affect your faithfulness in other areas. And so, we would just encourage y'all to do that.
Yeah.
It's a little tangent from the conversation topic, but yeah, we definitely think there's an importance of that. Because I think, I just have a special place for conversations in my heart. There's been so many key conversations that I've had in life with you, with mentors, with family, with people that I'm close with. And the Lord's just really shown me how through conversations, he allows you to further understand truth, whether that's his truth within the word or just the reality of life that we're facing right now. Because there's so many different ways to be able to get as full of a perspective on life as possible. Each of us as individuals have limited perspectives. And so one of the ways we can grow that is by having conversations. Hence the name Perspectives, the podcast. But
it's all making sense now.
And so from there, you're able to get this proper mix of, facts, objective truth, people's experiences, subjective truth, and biblical truth. And you can even have conversations with God. He is there for you to talk with. And so one of the other things it does is, as well, it helps you figure out which ideas you have are right and wrong. And I know our culture doesn't like to think that there is right and wrongs and absolute truth. They want to think it's all relative.
Right.
And that, there's this, I think as Ravi Zacharias puts it, there's this, instead of a egalitarianism, which means like equality. So I'll just say that. Instead of an equality of people and a elitism of ideas, which is what the Bible says, there are ideas that are better than others. We have flipped it to now where we have an equality of ideas and an elitism of people. And so we think that all ideas are equally valid and things like that, which is a postmodern viewpoint, which is not true. And so one of the ways that we figure out, okay, which of these ideas are good, which ways of acting is the proper way, is one of the ways is having conversations. And I mean, just from what I've learned, what I'll say is like, I do think, I mean, this is kind of getting deep down into the weeds, but I mean, just how postmodernism has infiltrated like the school systems and especially the universities. Like, that's one of the reasons why our culture thinks conversations is dangerous, because they don't think any interpretation is valid. And so from there's no point to having conversation. It's essentially just a power play. And so I would say one of my encouragements would be to, which I mean, I think you've seen this on social media, being encouraged, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in bad ways, but making sure that we're not pursuing comfort as our highest goal, but being willing to have conversations with friends or people who we may get uncomfortable and go to ideas and conversations that you're not sure about, that prompts you to think more about it, thinks you to rationalize and discern a little bit more. But as well, it just gets you out of the echo chambers that social media creates and allows you to just see the world from different perspectives and things like that. And I guess maybe we can end on this topic, is because I threw this question out to you before the podcast, because I definitely think it's an interesting one, and I think could potentially be one of the sure ways that we know as Christians that cancel culture and suppressing speech is not something that like we should be doing on a large scale to other people as Christians. Is freedom of speech. Like, do we think it's biblical, or do we think it's something that like the Bible doesn't make a way for? And so what are your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, is there a, like the what's it called, the amendments? I was like, do we have like an amendments like that in the Bible where it's like a freedom of speech? But no, I mean, I think the answer you gave about love, kind of looking at it from that perspective of how there's choice in love, right? I think that's an interesting point, because it's like, well, you can say whatever you want, right? Whether it's right or wrong. And so that part, gives room for that, right? Because you see multiple times in the Bible where people assume that God did something where he actually didn't do, right? Or where somebody was like, exalted themselves, above God because they were a king and they thought they were just this infinite being, whatever that might be. And so you kind of have that going on. So in that aspect, I mean, I can see it. But one thing that I was thinking about is, I think as believers, we have to walk that fine line of love that almost, in a sense, what is it called? You're walking in liberty, but don't use your liberty for vice, like it says in Galatians. You have free speech, but don't use your free speech as an occasion for sin, right? If I could rephrase, not that I want to rephrase, sorry, God, but just to kind of bring it to a more understanding, because I remember I saw on Twitter, there was a guy who said something, it was a very ignorant comment. And he was a Christian, and there was like a big uproar about it because, he would not almost kind of come off from that, repent from that, in a sense, if you could even say. But it's like, bro, you have free speech. You can say whatever you want, but you're wrong in your assessment, right? So I don't know. I'll let you speak. And
and I definitely agree with that. I will definitely say that. Kind of to sum up my thoughts on the question, which Josue was kind of saying was, I mean, this is something that I thought about for a while, about maybe a year ago. And at first I was kind of like, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to think that like freedom of speech is something that's biblical, because I mean, the Lord doesn't want us blaspheming his name. He doesn't want us cursing. Like, there's a lot of things he doesn't want to do. But then I was like, well, if you think about it, I mean, freedom of speech falls under the category of freedom of choice. And God being the Trinity, and God being love, and God being a God of love towards us, one of the preconditions of love is freedom of choice. And the fact that he does give us free will, and the fact that, you know, we did screw up and eat of the tree. But that doesn't mean that we should just remove those words from, or the ability of people to say those words, just as he didn't remove the tree from the garden. And so it's something that I think we should, there's a reason to make sure that we protect. And from there, that we as believers hold ourselves to a higher standard of walking in obedience in the midst of having that freedom.
Right.
And I think that's kind of why this whole thought of, you know, banning speech, whether it's on social media or whether it's in real life, or canceling people and preventing people from speaking, things like that. I mean, I'll definitely say there's, as I said, there are ideas that are good, ideas that are bad. But from there, like, we need to trust individual people to, especially Christians, to discern and be filled by the Spirit to come to a proper understanding.
Yeah, I mean, even just add to that, I was like, is there a verse like that? Paul says in Ephesians, let no unwholesome word proceed out of your mouth, only what's good for edification. That it might impart grace to those that hear it. And so I think, like, kind of what we're talking about, having wisdom in the freedom that we have in the Lord to be able to, address things, talk about things, say things, whatever that might be. So you can continue. I just thought about that.
Nah, dude, that was a really good ad. I think that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
I don't have anything else. Thank you guys again for listening. We always appreciate everybody listening. It's been awesome. It's been an awesome journey with you guys. We hear a lot of great feedback. Yeah,
it's awesome. And seeing, I mean, me and Josue were talking about it beforehand. Like, our last couple months have been the most streamed months by far.
Yeah,
like double what, and everything we were doing beforehand was steadily growing.
Yeah,
at a great rate.
Yeah,
and so we talked about beforehand. I mean, streams, money. I mean, we don't make any money from this right now. We ad free for a reason.
Yeah,
and but streams, even though they don't give us value, they're signifiers of the fruit that's going on with the conversations, and are confirmations of us steward everything well, hopefully providing inspiration, value, things like that. Having that said, we do have a couple podcasts coming up that are going to be exciting.
Yeah,
we got one with Josue's cousin.
Yes,
what's her name?
Looking forward to that. Peniel. That's going to be great,
and that'll be a really good conversation talking about her experience moving to America.
First generations Americans.
Yeah, and then coming up, hopefully we can get it together despite Rona coming back around Dallas, trying to tear everything up. But we're hoping to get together kind of a panel conversation to kind of put as our pinnacle conversation. Maybe it could be a good word.
Yeah, it's going to be a blockbuster panel of panelists, if that even makes sense.
But yeah, it'll be on the race and racism conversation, and breaking it down, figuring out the specific problems that are within our culture, figuring out specific solutions, and then what the proper hope and goal is, as us as Christians, whenever we engage the world and everything like that. But Josue, as always, dude, it's a ton of fun.
Great time.
And we thank y'all for listening. All of our information will be down in the description. If you want to go leave us a rating, leave any comments, that'd be much appreciated as well. The link for our website will be down in the description if you would like to support the podcast, support the organization, keep everything going. Until next time, appreciate y'all. Much love. God bless.